When we think of explosive athletes in basketball, one name that often comes to mind is Derrick Rose. But after only playing 3 minutes in this year's playoffs and likely to become a free agent, is Derrick Rose's career over? Before I answer that, let's rewind to the early days of Derrick Rose's career. After being drafted first overall in the 2008 NBA draft, he wasted no time making an impact in the league. Rose won the NBA Rookie of the Year award and quickly established himself as a rising star. In just his third season, he became the youngest player in NBA history to win the MVP award and led the Bulls to the Eastern Conference Finals. It was a perfect rags to riches story. A kid from a rough part of Chicago gets drafted by his hometown team and brings excitement for basketball back to the city not felt since Michael Jordan retired. But then, tragedy struck. Rose's career took a drastic turn after suffering a torn ACL in the first round of the 2012 playoffs, which caused him to miss the entire 2012 through 13 season. He returned for the 2013 through 14 season, but was plagued by injuries and played only 10 games. And while he was able to see the floor more in the next 2 seasons, it was clear that Derrick Rose was a shell of himself from his MVP season. After having 3 procedures on his knee in 4 years, Rose wasn't the freak athlete he once was, and the skills he needed to offset that, like shooting, never seemed to develop. How could his skills develop when he seemed like he was rehabbing injuries for 4 straight seasons? The pressure for Derrick to reclaim his spot as an elite superstar was building, but time was running out. After spending 8 seasons with the Bulls, Derrick was traded to the New York Knicks in the summer of 2016.
You lying. You serious?
Derrick was visibly shaken when he found out about that trade. The thousands of hours of rehab he had spent trying to reclaim his form from his MVP season must have felt like it had just been wasted in that moment. His hometown team, the team he grew up watching and rooting for, had turned its back on him.
Sean, man. That shit made me who I am, man.
Knicks fans were excited to pair Derrick Rose and Carmelo Anthony together, and it was an opportunity for Derrick to prove that he was still a star. Although he put up solid numbers, Rose's tenure with the Knicks was seen as a failure, as the season once again ended with a knee injury, and the Knicks missed the playoffs. In the next season, he signed as a free agent with the LeBron James-led Cavaliers. After dealing with an ankle injury and bone spurs throughout the first few months of the season, Rose took a leave of absence from the team, during which he reportedly considered retiring. It was clear that the young phenom was worn down, both physically and mentally, by his injuries and the criticism that came along with them. After playing just 16 games with the Cavs and averaging 10 points per game, Rose was traded to the Jazz and then waived just 2 days later. Derrick Rose had a tough few years. He even walked away from the game several times in the first 10 years of his career due to the toll the game had on his body and psyche. He was without a job and had seemingly hit rock bottom. As Rose would later reveal in an interview with ESPN, the lowest point I would say was in Cleveland, when I got taken out of the air and I thought my career was over. I wasn't able to run for a month and a half. I didn't know what was going on with my ankle, and I was just trying to figure things out. Just when we thought it might all be over for Derrick Rose, an old friend came calling near the end of the 2017 season that breathed life back into his career. His former coach on the Bulls, Tom Thibodeau, gave Rose a guaranteed contract with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Derrick Rose had a career resurgence in Minnesota, averaging 18 points per game off the bench and providing veteran leadership to the team's young core. Derrick even had a career high 50 points on Halloween of 2018. It was like he jumped into a DeLorean and traveled back to 2011. He was a menace out there, getting into the paint at will and finishing over everyone. He was emotional after the game, and understandably so. After working so hard to get his body and mind right for the past 7 years, it all culminated in an inspiring performance that only Derrick Rose could have. NBA players showered their support for Derrick Rose after the game because they knew the kind of player he used to be and what was taken from him by the injuries. After having a great run in Minnesota, Rose signed with the Detroit Pistons on a 2-year contract in the summer of 2019. He continued to be a productive player off the bench and helped mentor the younger players. But with the Pistons rebuilding, they eventually chose to trade Rose to the New York Knicks, once again teaming up with his coach, Tom Thibodeau. In a short period of time with the Knicks, he became an important player in their rotation. And when the playoffs rolled around, Rose ended up becoming the Knicks' go-to option on offense. He averaged 19.4 points per game in his first playoff as a Knick, and was even thrust into the starting lineup for the final 3 games of the series against the Hawks. Though the Knicks were eliminated in 5 games, Derrick Rose played extremely well. So how was Derrick Rose able to have a resurgence after having 5 surgeries in the first 9 years of his career? To put it simply, he worked his ass off. It took Derrick Rose more than 6 years from initially tearing his ACL to being a highly effective player again, starting with his stint with the Wolves. During those years, he had to rehab multiple times and build his body back up. But he also had to get better as a shooter and gain a better understanding of the game as a whole. Rose has had some of the best true shooting percentages of his career in 4 of the past 5 seasons, only comparable to his MVP season, which is just incredible. Klay Thompson spoke highly of D. Rose after going through a similar string of career-altering injuries himself. Klay said, "Man, that's so hard to go through as an athlete. You lose a little pop, you're so used to playing a certain way, so used to jumping a certain height. That's the hardest part of the game, honestly. You've got to adjust," and he's adjusted incredibly well. Former teammate Joakim Noah had this to say about D. Rose. "When you talk about expectations and people's criticism, and things he's had to deal with on such a big scale, for him to be at peace in his mind and navigate that so gracefully, that just shows the character that he has, not just as a player for sticking with it, but him as a person and what he stands for. He's somebody that I was able to train and work out with for 10 years, and just to see his growth, I couldn't be more proud as a big brother." These days, Derrick doesn't talk too much about the struggles that he had physically recovering from his injuries. He's more so become an advocate of athletes speaking out about their mental health. In an interview from 2020 about the mental health struggles he endured playing in Chicago, Rose told ESPN, "My vibrations were low. When your vibrations are low, you hear everything, you seek everything, and me seeking or hearing everything, that was just me being attracted to how I was feeling at the time, and that's negative. So when I changed my vibrations and matured as a person and as a man, that's when I started to grow and develop who I was as a person and individual and change my character." In the same interview, he voices concerns about the effects that social media has on mental wellness. In his words, in order for people to find their calm place to be able to address it, he thinks people should stay off their phone. He said, "Like that's one thing that's distracting a lot of people right now, is people actually being on their devices. They're not understanding who they are, so they're following other people." Rose seems intent on seeking knowledge on his own, not what the traditional media wants you to think. I think most of us know how traditional media manipulates and suppresses information sometimes, which is why viewership and readership of traditional media sources are dwindling by the day. So how should Derrick Rose's career be defined? For some, Derrick Rose's career has become synonymous with what ifs. What if Derrick Rose never tore his ACL? Would that have stopped the cascade of knee injuries that followed from happening? Well, what if, rather than focusing on what could have been, let's shift our perspective? What if we as sports fans showed more compassion towards athletes dealing with both physical and mental health struggles? What if we became their support system instead of tearing them down? We should be helping each other out, guys. At least that's what Derrick Rose thinks. His advice is to always find a way to help others, no matter what it is. I mean, that's life, right? Helping others out? I feel like that's life. So as we wrap up this video, let's circle back to the question we started with. Is Derrick Rose's career over? The resilience he's shown is a testament to his character and determination. After everything he's overcome, I wouldn't count him out just yet.
You walked away from the game a couple times.
Yeah.
As you went through what was going on emotionally in your head, was there ever a point where you thought about retiring?
Nah, I always say I quit a couple of times, but I never gave up.